is my commandment, that you love one another, that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another, that your joy may be full. That your joy may be full. That your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another, that your joy may be full.
Hello, I'm glad you're watching. Today we're going to talk about the Ten Commandments. And those were the first rules that God gave the people on their journey in the Exodus for how they should live, how He wanted them to live. So I'm going to read about that. And the Israelites were camped at Mount Sinai, this huge mountain here, and that's the mountain where God gave Moses the Ten Commandments. And the Ten Commandments, you'll have to pretend this is stone, it's not, were written on stone, because that way the people could carry them with them, and they couldn't forget, because they were written on these stones, how God wanted them to live. So I'm reading from the Children's Bible, and this part is God's mountain. The people of Israel set up camp at the foot of Mount Sinai, where God had first called Moses to be their leader. Moses climbed the mountain to be alone and quiet, so God could speak to him. "Tell the Israelites," God said, "I've looked after them just like a mother bird looking after her chicks. I will go on caring for them, but they, for their part, must obey me. I'm going to speak to you, Moses, in front of them all, to show them that you really are my chosen leader. They will see only a cloud, but they will hear my voice." Moses hurried down to the camp to give everyone God's message. The Israelites had certainly learned God was taking care of them, but now they had to realize God is holy too. Holy means separate or apart. God is not a human being with faults and failings. He's all good, with nothing bad in him. His people too must love and obey him by doing what is right. Moses told the people to get ready for God to speak to them. They must wash themselves in everything they wore. That would remind them how pure and clean they needed to be in the presence of God. Moses marked out a boundary line all around the bottom of the mountain. No one, not even an animal, must cross that line and come too close to God's mountain. On the third morning, a rumble of thunder brought them all to the doors of their tents. Moses led them to the foot of the mountain. The top was wrapped in cloud, but as they watched, the cloud changed to fiery smoke, and thunder crashed loudly. Then the air was shattered by the loud, long blast of a trumpet. The people trembled and shook with fear. Moses spoke to God, and a roll of thunder came in reply. "Don't make us stay here," begged the frightened people. "God is too great and terrible for us to listen to. You speak to us instead and tell us all what God is saying." So Moses and Aaron set off alone up the mountain to hear what God had to say. And Aaron is Moses' older brother. So we have the Ten Commandments, and they're here listed on a paper, but I'm going to go ahead and explain a little bit about what they mean. So the first 5 tell the right way to treat God. So God says, do not worship other gods. That's the first commandment. Because the people had been in Egypt and they had many gods and goddesses in Egypt, but God was telling them, I'm the only true God. God says, do not make idols to worship. Because that was another thing that other peoples did. They would make something and then bow down and worship it, whether it was an animal or a person, whatever. The third one is, do not take God's name in vain. God's name stands for God Himself. So don't use it as a swear word or a promise in God's name to do something and then go back on your word. You have to show reverence for God by not using His name in that way and to treat His name with respect. The fourth, keep the Sabbath day holy. Holy means set apart or separate. The seventh day, the Sabbath, must be set aside for God. It was intended to be a day for learning about Him and worshiping Him. And even the animals had a holiday. And we still follow that today by Sunday being the most important day to come to church and worship God. The next, God says respect your parents. That's the fifth one. God made families and put parents in charge of their children. Duty to God includes showing care and respect for parents. Jesus summed up all these commandments in the single command, love God with all our hearts. And we love God when we obey Him. The next part of the 10 Commandments, the last 5, have to do with loving others. So, God says, do not murder. That's the 6th commandment. So it's wrong to kill, whether out of anger or cruelty or in order to get money. The next, do not commit adultery. God's plan was that a husband and wife should belong to each other for as long as they lived. To commit adultery is to make love to someone else's husband or wife. God says that's wrong. The 8th commandment, do not steal. No one has the right to take anything that belongs to someone else. And we all know how it feels to have something stolen from us. You know, it makes us feel bad. So we don't do that to other people. We don't steal from other people. The next one, the 9th commandment, do not tell lies about others. No one must tell lies about someone when he's on trial in a court of law, or not tell lies about people behind their backs. In other words, talk about someone and lie about them when they're not around. And the last one, do not covet. Covet is a hard word. It means to want something that belongs to someone else so badly you're jealous of them. And this could be anything or anyone. So an Israelite might look at someone's house or donkey or even their wife and think how nice it would be if you had them. So God says He's not to be jealous or try to take them for yourself. When God had finished speaking, He told Moses He would give him 2 stone tablets with His laws engraved on them. And they were stone because it would last and they would know where they were. So we've got a couple of fake stone tablets here. And you can imagine that the people carried these around with them to remember God's commandments. Moses felt close to God because he went up on Mount Sinai, got the 10 Commandments from Him. So I wonder where you feel close to God. I feel close to God during worship on Sundays. I can feel that He's close to us. I feel close to God when I'm outside because it's the beautiful world that God created. And I feel close to God when I enjoy being with my family. And you, I'm sure, have ways that you feel close to God. And that's a wonderful thing to know that He's with us. So in today's Bible story, we heard about Moses and the 10 Commandments. So those rules help us love God and love others. Now, here's the Wonder Box. There was a special place that the 10 Commandments were kept, and it was made by the people, and that way everyone knew those 10 Commandments were very special. And this one is just paper, but if you can use your imagination, it was a wooden box. It was covered with gold, and it had 2 angels on top. It had poles sticking out, and this meant that one could stand in the front and one could stand behind. They could lift it up. It must have been heavy because gold is heavy. And they would carry it with them when they went through the wilderness. And that was 40 years. So if you can imagine, they carried that for 40 years. And inside, these are just paper, were the 10 Commandments, the ones on stone that God wrote and gave to Moses. So they were always carrying around in the Ark of the Covenant the 10 Commandments. In this way, they couldn't forget God's laws. Okay, our faith word for today is trust. And that means believing God's love is always with you. So we have to trust God that He's with us. Whether things happen are good or bad, He's always with us. So, I wonder, why do you think rules are important? He gave us the 10 Commandments. I think we needed them because sometimes we forget and we don't treat God or other people with love. So He wants us to remember. And why do you think God wanted the Israelites to follow the 10 Commandments? Can you imagine not having rules? What if we didn't have stoplights? So when you pulled up to a corner, everybody could go whenever they want. Well, then you'd have accidents. So that's the idea. We need rules so that we don't get into trouble. And our Bible verse is from Joshua 1, verse 9, and the second part of it. The Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And if you want to look that up in the Bible, it's not too hard to find the book of Joshua. So if you can say these with me, if you know them, the Bible goes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. So Joshua was one of the early leaders in the Bible. So we want to have our connection to God. It's the most important reason for spiritual practices. And 10 was an important number in the Bible story today because there were 10 commandments. So try to remember them. And that's our story for today.